Chris here from AV Technology. I'm here with Graham Barrett, Head of Strategic Partnerships for Harman in this part of the world. That's on your business card, Graham?
That's correct. That is my day job, is strategic partnerships for Australia. I also work with the broader Harman team in supporting developed markets. So Japan, Korea, New Zealand, and Australia are, I guess, my stamping ground here in Asia Pac.
So this is a convergence conversation which we're producing for the Integrate Expo. You're the second cab off the rank, so you're clearly the second most important person in the industry.
I think I'm the only person who actually asked to be interviewed in this.
Hang on. That may be true, but it's not something we broadcast. I guess convergence is an interesting word. Should we start there? Because I'd like to talk to you about AV and IT. For starters, why should people not just check out now? Like, it's an old chestnut. Haven't we done it to death? Is it worth tuning into a podcast about AV and IT?
Absolutely. I think, the groundwork has been done over the last 5-10 years. I mean, we've said time and time again, convergence is done. But really that just relates to the basics of getting audio and video on and off a network. With the Harman AMX SVSI platform, for example, we started doing that 15 years ago. We've seen an ever increasing adoption of AV products on the network, either sending video and audio around or potentially control. We've seen really a continued distancing from the, I guess, core tenets of AV, things like control and automation, and most importantly, integration, becoming or being part of these AV solutions. So I think the convergence story, when we look at it from a audio and video on the network perspective, sure, we can say that's done. But I would also posit that it is far from the norm for the IT people within an organization to be happy about the video and audio on the network. And secondly, we still have this divide between AV and the enterprise. AV is still its own little silo. Yes, we might be using the enterprise network to get some video and audio around, but it's still seen as a separate part of the organization to the core IT infrastructure and, more importantly, the enterprise platforms that our customers use.
Sure. I suspect that if IT was on this call, they would be saying convergence is done when we say it's done. Is that fair enough?
I think you're probably right, and there's also a movement. Whereas we saw an increasing number of systems and devices leveraging the network, what we haven't seen is quite the same adoption of IT and systems in enterprise networks. There's still this segregation between the real, what we call the real IT world of an organization and, the AV VLAN or whatever it's perceived as.
Sure. So let's talk about just at what level of acceptance AV is on those enterprise networks. Could you, I guess, characterize in your view how far we are along from full acceptance and maybe some of the factors involved with why there's reticence?
I think, and again, it's important to understand here that AV over IP, be that Dante, be that some of the proprietary systems like SVSI or Crestron's NVX, have been around for a long time, and they are very broadly deployed in many, many environments. But in terms of those products actually being even on the corporate network, I would suggest that is maximum maybe 20-25%. The rest of those deployments tend to be on standalone hardware, standalone switches, standalone hardware. It's one of the reasons why Netgear's AV switches have been so successful, is that, the complexity of getting, AV hardware like a networked AV device onto a corporate network is significant. And so many people will just go, look, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to stick it on a network in the room. And if I need to connect one thing out to the corporate network, that might be the control system or whatever. But we're fundamentally missing the boat there when it comes to AV becoming a true integrated platform. And importantly, we're also missing the boat in AV becoming intrinsically integrated with the enterprise systems that customer leverages, be that their help desk and ticketing system, be that their data and analytics system, be that, whatever we're talking about, because the AV system is this little isolated, even if it's on the corporate network, it tends to be this little isolated environment. It isn't able to participate in that, in the systems and processes that the customer generally will have in place for their entire environment.
I guess that's partially answers my question around, if we are siloed off, who cares? But if you're making the point that the general systems could really benefit from, say some of the analytics and metrics that's coming from AV systems. So, who's losing out the most by not seeing full convergence?
And the answer to that is the end user. And you asked earlier, what are some of the barriers to that intrinsic adoption of the platform? The big one is security. Very rarely will an IT administrator say, I would like all of the audiovisual equipment on my network, because straight away they expose themselves to some fairly significant vulnerabilities. I mean, we talked many times, in fact, at Integrate last year, we talked about the vulnerabilities that AV can introduce to a corporate network, and the fact that many of the big hacks that have happened recently have happened not through AV appliances, but non-network appliances, things like air conditioning controllers, printers, for example, are just two examples, or printer systems, two examples of major hacks that have happened within the corporate and government space through pieces of equipment which were not traditional IT, but were on the enterprise network because there was a benefit to the customer. So we've actually seen a rejection of this idea of non-IT appliances on the network, and in some cases, much more stringent requirements for those AV devices, this idea of an AV network and all the equipment within it being exposed to the corporate network through a security boundary, like a controller as an example. So, with some of those big hacks and with some of the security concerns that we've seen, we've actually, I would suggest, taken a few steps backwards in AV becoming, that intrinsic part of an enterprise network.
So you touched on control. Is there anything in your experience of introducing your new control platform, Muse, to the market, which famously is not playing anymore in a walled garden, but is being a good citizen on the network? Is there any learnings from that introduction of the product into the market around, where AV control sits in the bigger picture on an enterprise network?
Very much so. Look, I think the reality is a control system can be that security boundary between the AV environment and the enterprise environment. And because it is, fundamentally as a control system, it is actually talking to all of the equipment within the AV environment. It can actually expose all of that information and data to the enterprise network. So that's the ultimate goal when we talk about integration. What we've found is that, particularly when we're talking about proprietary platforms, proprietary programming, there's a real reticence by the end user to believe that appliance can actually be secure, because they can't go and open up the code and have a look at it because it's in a language which they don't understand. They obviously don't have access to the tools that allow them to go and open that code. And you can make a piece of hardware as secure as possible, but if it's connected to an enterprise network, it is fundamentally vulnerable to attack. So what we found with Muse is the ability for the programming to be written in open source languages. So as you know from the launch, which you were famously part of back at Integrate a couple of years ago, we support a bunch of standard languages in Python, JavaScript, and Groovy, and then Node-RED through Muse Automator. Now, all of those are well understood languages which you can open and read with any tool. So what we found is that the actual IT administrators, in fact, it's not the IT administrators, it's the security people within some of these government departments are saying, great, I've looked at your hardware, I understand how that is secured, but now I want to look at the code. And so they're actually able to review, for example, Python code and say, yes, this code is not pulling in any external libraries. It's not accessing the network in any way that we're unhappy with. And so we're able to demonstrate a very secure hardware and software platform, or hardware and programming platform would be the correct way of putting it. That their IT people and their security people are able to audit and say, yes, this is not a vulnerability. Whereas if we look at, some of these hacks in the past with things like, as I said, air conditioning controllers and printer controllers, again, not looking at AV for a minute, they've all been proprietary devices running proprietary code, using proprietary software. So there's no ability for the end user IT security people to go look at that and say, is this secure? So that's been a real eye-opener for us to be able to have a conversation with an IT administrator's security team and demonstrate that this solution, our hardware and the integrator's programming, is actually secure, and they can validate that. And they can then do things like monitoring to see if any code is ever sent to that device, which would potentially make it vulnerable, or even locking down the device so it can't be reprogrammed except through connection of a device, and the username and password entered into it. So it is, you get to this point where you have a proper grown-up secure environment that the customer can audit and have a level of confidence in. And once you get to that point, then you can start the discussions around, okay, how do we integrate with your enterprise software? Because we have all of this data, and this is the currency of today is data, and getting that data from all of the environments. And AV is now ubiquitous in any large corporate government or education environment, getting that data and sharing that data with the enterprise tools, and ultimately with AI, which is where all of those enterprise tools are going, is collecting the data, presenting it to AI so we can get meaningful insights into that data from AI, is really the future and where we see this real next level of convergence. If we say that Dante and networked AV solutions are acceptable, then getting the data out of those and all the other devices within the environment and integrating that into an enterprise so they can share that data with AI is the real future of convergence as we see it.
Is there like a middle road here? Like, can the AV system sit on, their own network in the same building, obviously having their own infrastructure, but having something like Muse acting as the gatekeeper between the enterprise network and the AV infrastructure?
Absolutely. It's actually a common design discussion that we're having with integrators is guys, put your AV system in whatever it is, stick a Muse system into that environment, and that will be your gateway to whatever the enterprise system that you want to integrate with. So, the end user is saying, I really want data out of my AV system in my visualization software, be that Splunk or Power BI. Okay, great. We'll stick the Muse system in there. That will effectively normalize all that data that's coming from the AV components and poke that into Power BI as an example. So yeah, it is becoming quite an interesting environment. We've got a project at the moment where the customer has 300 and something Cisco UC systems running Teams, and they have no way of knowing whether in their enterprise world whether those systems are running correctly, whether they're working. So we actually have Muse controllers going not into each room, because the Teams room is a self-contained capable solution, and effectively using an API into those Cisco systems and just exposing to their monitoring system, which is bizarrely called What's Up, not WhatsApp, but What's Up, the status of those systems and also the status of the connected displays. And it's a really interesting application because, yes, we talk about Muse and AMX being a control system. This device is no longer a control system; it's a data aggregator and a interface point to an enterprise system.
Just to change tack somewhat, but is the durability of gigabit switches or the enduring nature of them surprising to you? It feels like even 10 years ago, lots of people were betting the farm on 10 gig infrastructure. I don't know, you would know. My sense is that there isn't as much of that as AV would like there to be. What's your take?
I think what has led 1 gig to be so prevalent is compression techniques. You know, the reality is that if you said 10 years ago that you could get a 4K 60 444 signal onto a 1 gig network and get an acceptable picture, not acceptable, but damn good picture out the other end from our hardware or a bunch of others, then people would say you're mad. I remember back in my early days doing, 128 kilobit video conferencing with ISDN and going, look at that picture, it's amazing. It looks like 6 pixels. And you look at what we can do over a 1 gig network today from an AV perspective, and that's really the only lens I can put on it. I think those compression technologies, both in video and in audio, have allowed 1 gig to be more than good enough for the bulk of what we do. Now 8K is coming, and we're already talking within Harman about, okay, what does an 8K SVSI platform look like? But interestingly, it's not a 10 gig network. It's a 3.5 gig network or a 4 gig network,
right?
Or potentially multiple legs of a 1 gig network. So I think there is, there will be an inflection point where there is, if you want to put 8K video on a network, there will be something that you have to do. A 1 gig network is just not going to do the job for you. But we don't, certainly at the moment, see that requirement to go all the way to 10.
When you look at a trade show like Integrate and you chart sort of its history back from, even when I was scurrying around with a exhibitor's badge on 12, 13 years ago, the makeup of sort of IT companies who are making AV gear. What's your sense of how that landscape has changed and what it means for this discussion?
I think, and I remember when you were running around with an exhibitor's badge on, I think it was in a big tent, but out at Homebush. But I remember the first time that Microsoft exhibited at Integrate. It was before Zoom and Teams, before COVID, and thinking, that's interesting. Why is Microsoft relevant to the AV community? And of course, you look at it now, and Microsoft Teams is perceived as AV by many customers. So I think that we've seen, and again, it plays into your convergence discussion. We've seen AV become ubiquitous in our customers' environments, and we've seen those big IT players like Microsoft, like HP, like obviously Cisco, actually go, okay, well, here is where we play in that space. So that's obviously radically changed the look of a trade show that used to be predominantly, there was the big black boxes and wiggly lights area at the back, which I shouldn't say now, working for a company that does lots of big black boxes and wiggly lights. But the reality is that that whole collaboration, immersive experience environment is something that those big players now have a very vested interest in. And I think that's what's changed the show is that a lot of what we used to, we look at, back in those days, we did projector shootouts, if you remember. Now, it's pretty rare that you're going to line up 75-inch panel A versus 75-inch panel B, because they're both good enough. And so a lot of that technology, I remember going to my first Infocom 30-something years ago, and the projector shootout was the highlight of the show, and going, oh, that looks terrible. That looks marginally less terrible. And a lot of that technology is now good enough in its almost most basic form. So there's no need for a lot of that anymore. Obviously, in the high end of audio and in the very high end of stadium video and LED and all that kind of stuff, that sort of environment has a place. But a lot of what people are coming to the show for is, what am I putting into my meeting room? What am I putting into my lecture theatre? What am I going to put into my retail environment? What am I going to put into my stadium? And not the big black boxes or the big screens. It's what does my customer experience look like in those environments? How can I build my retail space to be compelling and engaging beyond just sticking a bunch of screens on the wall? So I think that's the industry's changed as the shows change, as you would expect. But I think a lot of what we used to go to an event like Integrate for to look at or hear, we now accept can be good enough without a huge amount of A/B comparison, for example. Now there's as I say, there's large venue audio, large venue lighting, immersive audio, all these sorts of things are still very much something people need to experience. But a lot of what we used to go to a show to experience, we can acquire from just about any vendor, of course.
And we can, I guess, track the changing landscape of the exhibitors throughout a show like Integrate over the last 10 plus years. But what I'm interested to hear from you is, in your experience as an exhibitor, how has the attendee makeup changed in your view? Like, I guess wrapped up in that question is, does IT really care about what's going on at Integrate?
And I would say situationally. Some of the end users who have very, very large fleets of audiovisual have huge interest. And, in many cases, if you look at customers like the universities or justice or defence, have dedicated AV teams. And they are very much coming to a show like Integrate to say, is what we are doing best practice? What is the future of platform X, Y, or Z? And those individuals are IT people. They might be wearing a black t-shirt, but they are, these days very much part of the IT team, and more, particularly in terms of the senior management, the management are actually from IT backgrounds, more and more in the technicians as well. So I think, I often talk about, or used to often talk about maturity of AV adoption in an enterprise. And I had this graph, and there's a point where AV becomes such an important part of your day-to-day business that you have to invest in understanding a strategy, a support infrastructure, all those bits. If you think about a university as an example, if your projector or display in a teaching space isn't working, you can't teach. Your core business is teaching. You are no longer delivering your core business. So once that end user gets to that level of maturity, then there is an inflection point where they almost have to become interested in AV. But as I said, you've also got a situational situation where many, particularly small to medium enterprises, are like, okay, I buy my MTR Teams bar from the same place I buy my whiteboard markers and my toilet paper. Less interest in that sort of environment. Then you've got the new AV opportunities that we're seeing more and more. Things like experiential retail. It's not new for AV, but it's exploding. The evening venues, which are doing amazing, creating amazing experiences with audio, video, and lighting. For those, again, for some of those, and I say new verticals, they're not really new verticals, but historically they would look at audio and lighting. Now they're like, no, we want to create an experience, and we create an experience with audio, video, and lighting. So they become very much AV customers and excited about AV.
And to sign off, Graham, anything you can reveal about Harman and what you'll be talking about at this year's Integrate show in August, especially along the lines of what we've just been discussing today? Is there much that's kind of you're excited about?
Very excited. This show will be the biggest show for Harman in Australia ever. Our distribution partners in Australia, Madison AV, have a dedicated Harman stand, which will have all of Harman product on it, and obviously both Madison AV and Harman staff. So that will be obviously the centerpiece of the trade show floor. We then have a separate Harman experience room upstairs, which is where we will be doing live demonstrations of things like our new immersive platform from Flux, obviously our large venue audio and lighting solutions. It's also where we're going to be talking about our next generation AVL control and delivery platform, AVX, and delivering live demonstrations of that for the first time in Australia. So it is going to be a huge show for Harman. We're very excited to be both bringing, I guess, our entire portfolio to the show for the first time in terms of everything from our simple, retail portable PA product right through to, audio visual control and video distribution through large venue audio and lighting. So that's very exciting for people, in some cases for the first time, to see the whole of Harman story, that is significantly more than its component parts. We'll also have a big team there from the US, from Singapore, a bunch of our senior product management people for people to talk to. So it's going to be a huge show, and we're very excited.
Great. Looking forward to it. Well, thanks for your time today, mate. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me.